But welcome to episode 5 of Redeployable's live lessons. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into networking, talking about work experience, talking about how to maximize your skills, and also how you can really realize your value when you leave the military and join the civilian workplace. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ben Reed. I'm the founder and CEO of Redeployable, and I'm delighted to welcome Nick Dennis here today, who is a global talent lead for Marex. So Nick, if we get stuck into it, could you just give us a bit of an introduction about yourself and your background?
So I've worked in talent acquisition now for over 20 years, and that's from working from a contingent perspective, supplying into companies, to more recently, I've worked at KPMG, Man Group and Marex, who are a financial services platform for those who don't know. All of the roles have been very much about bringing amazing talent into organizations, starting that journey from the onboarding perspective, and then ultimately handing over to the business who work very much from a talent development perspective. So just to be very clear, it's very much the acquisition side, as in reaching out to the external market that I'm involved in. On a personal level, I have done 10 years with the Reserve Army from university, from serving the military police, and then I transferred my job to Australia and served with the Australian Reserve over there in the artillery. Myself was just talking, and I'm a bit of a sport and an OCD person, so I have ended up doing a lot of Ironman races and triathlon and Attilos and crazy things as well, which keeps me sane, obviously, as I'm no longer as involved with the military.
I mean, what a background. 8, I think you said 8, you finished 8 Ironman.
My sins. It is an addiction, I can say no way. It's also an amazing community of suffering, so quite often for me, it resonates with the military, to be honest, that mindset of overcoming obstacles and always delivering what you've set up to achieve.
Yeah, amazing. And for me, it's really important to start to bring people like yourselves with your background onto these calls. I think getting your input on how people can best maximize their opportunities and get that first interview. I think I used the term with you the other day, you're the gatekeeper to an organization, and you reframed my mindset and said you're the gate opener to an organization. So, super interesting, and thanks for being here. I think first question then, I'm sure we've got a ton of vets on the call now, or service leavers looking to get out. So I'm sure you've got lots and lots and lots of applications coming into Marex and any organisation that you've worked with before. How can candidates stand out, and what do veterans need to do to give themselves the best chance of getting that first interview?
Yeah. To be honest, it is difficult for anybody to stand out, and that's how I'd like to start the premise. In terms of, from an internal perspective, we have applicant tracking systems. So when you see a role on, say, LinkedIn, you apply to that will come through to a system, and we can obviously record who's coming through. We're in a situation that it's so easy to apply for roles that we literally get thousands upon thousands of applications. And going from there, it is very difficult to stand out. So if we have, for example, in my team, we would have various recruiters. They would work on a specific role. CVs would obviously come through to them, and they will review the CVs, work with the hiring managers, and then obviously move people forward to a screening call, to interview, to final interview. This could be through Teams, it may be face-to-face. So the challenge initially is to get past that first screen. And when you are going through volumes, it's hard. I think there's been a lot of work done, it's fair to say, from resettlement groups and the military, working at CVs, really trying to level the language to ensure that you're taking the amazing military experience you've got and put it into a civilian context. And if I just give examples here, a lot of it is it's about data points, it's about delivery targets, about what you've managed to achieve. Obviously, if you're sitting in a civilian world, you're going to be talking about revenue or cost save, and that's harder to do within a military context. So wherever possible, aligning that language. It's also very important to have a very clear CV. If I think of the resumes that were best, obviously name, contact details, summary, that summary is absolutely key. No more than 3 to 4 lines, absolute maximum, and try and make it as specific as possible. Obviously, we're amazing, we're focused, we're high achievers, but a dedicated individual who has achieved the following, blah, blah, very, very specific points. Then I would always put education up there as well, and then looking at your last experience. The big thing to do with CV, and I'll be honest, covering letters in the main are not used anymore. Some companies require them. Don't waste time in the covering letter. The bit that's going to sell you is going to be your CV. So making sure that it's really concise. So when, for example, myself or one of my team open up, they can see exactly what you've been doing and also the relevance to the role you're applying for. So, for example, if you're applying to role in compliance, you may not have had specific compliance experience, but you're using language around working in a team. I've ensured the following procedures, policies, etc. have been adhered to. So you're putting that language in. You may not be able to use the actual wording, but it's very, very clear. So that's from the CV perspective, just being very, very focused. And I can't emphasize enough, please do tailor CVs to individual roles, because your CV is your first port of call. But the other big thing in the military is the network. We'll talk more, I'm sure, about actually how to do that. But by getting that entry point, someone in the business who can refer you in, who can say, this is someone who's come out, they've got great experience, they're looking to move into a role and the following, ultimately they link to us. And when we look at the CV, we're looking at it with a bigger lens. Also, if someone comes from a referral, everyone generally is incentivized to refer people in the business. They will refer good people. There's no agency cost. There's also someone who is a known quantity. So from my point of view, I'm going to take that as a high recommendation, and I will always give that CV the time that it's due, and that's a way of doing it. We'll talk more about how to do that, but really reaching out and ensuring that your CV can, wherever appropriate, get through to the TA team through a personal referral also helps you to ensure in that pool of review that you've got the best possible chance of being seen, considered, and taken through to the next phase.
Wowza. That's a good block of chunks of information. There are a few things that I took from that personally, and I'll dig into it in a little bit more depth. But ultimately, your team, you say your team, and I think it's good to give the people on the call context, because you might be applying to an organization, but you're actually initially applying to either technology or a team at a starting point. Can you just explain, you talked about positioning of information on a CV, which is something that I was never taught, like where you should place that information to give you the best chance, the time in which it takes you to review CVs. I know you could probably now, with your experience, review CVs quickly, but that's all amazing information. But what that networking piece is the one for me, because I'm a big believer in relentless networking. You know, I'll speak to a lot of people to being well researched, but why does that like networking element, why does a referral stand out to you most as a TA team, and why will someone have a much better chance of getting that first interview with the referral?
I think particularly coming from a military background, because the skills people have are incredible, but it is about how you translate that into a civilian context. And that's the really hard part of it. Whereas if someone can come to me where they're military, and I do encourage network with military people, network as broadly as you can. Go to, for example, that's really great here actually, Armed Forces Covenant. It's a covenant that a lot of companies will sign up to. There's various levels to it, and it shows that as an employer, you are very keen to bring people in from the military, so you understand where they are. I mean, a lot of these will be, they're much broader than financial services. They'll be within engineering, telecoms, aviation, lots of different sectors. So these are organizations who actively want to help people making that transition period. And looking at that side, trying to get someone to come and speak to us and say, look, this is someone who's come out of the logistics, they've done this, but actually they did a secondment with the engineers, or they and just trying to bring that CV to life will really help myself and the CV review team at that point. If I think as an organization, I mean, we may deal with 100 plus roles at any one time. You asked about the structure. A recruiter will cover a certain number of those roles. They will understand the requirement of the business, and sometimes a little bit of extra help from someone who understands or sees the value or sees that key transition language will be absolutely critical. So I may review it, but someone says, actually, but drill down, look at when they work, look at the experience they've had there. They worked alongside a post team. They were responsible for X amount of volume here. They did this, and they're just trying to help people to better grasp the amazing things they have done, rather than just saying language that may not land so well within that capacity. And obviously it will help us to explain to a hiring manager who, again, may or may not have military experience, that will be relevant. A lot of organizations do very specific programs. They will go in, they'll do work placements, they'll bring in individuals from organizations, they'll go and talk to people in the military, but it's how do you get past the ones who possibly haven't got those standard programs to really get yourself in front of that review team and get the hiring manager. Because once you're in front of a hiring manager and you can drill down your CV, your experience stands for itself. But it's just that first, getting over that first hurdle to make sure you're in the mix.
Great advice. If you take a step back, though, and I know it's a challenge, it was a challenge for me getting out of the forces, and I know it's a challenge for many leaving the forces now. Even people who have transitioned out of the forces and maybe not landed in a role where they feel like they're fully utilised, they might be underemployed or not using the skill set that they have. How would you advise people to best identify where they fit into the corporate world, whether that's industry, whether that's function? Because I know firsthand, and also from a lot of people that I speak with, that's such a challenge.
Yeah. I think the big thing is look at your experience. I mean, with the best of the world, a lot of people you're competing with, and it is a competition to get those roles, will have had, for example, say 15, 20 years experience, let's say in an HR role or a compliance role or a finance role. You haven't got those specific functions. So the experience you've got, I've got to say, like, what is key to what you've been doing? And really, if you've been involved in, say, more on the logistics side or something more on the engineering or the telco side, all of those things, how they're relatable and also things you're passionate about. But a big thing for me as well is if you've come out of a role in the military, you've been in the job for 20 years, I think that the misconception is you're going to find this amazing job within your 6-12 months of transition you're going to be in the next 20 years of your life. There's a fair chance you will not be in that role for that duration. You will go into a role that will help to maximize, utilize your skill set while you're there. And while you're there, grow to those skills. You'll gain the civilian skills. So while you might be working in a finance department with someone who has an awful lot more experience in that area, your finance skills are growing alongside theirs. So then you start to really get the civilian value. I mean, I'll give you one example. There's an individual who, while they were there, they actually did a day release shadow with a competitor of ours. From that perspective, they then, having gone through their career transition, actually reached out to that employee again, having done that experience, and the employer took them on directly. So it's also taking all opportunities that you have to really see where that skill is. But if you'd have asked them, are they going to end up in a financial services organization? Probably not, but that helped them with that transition. So it's really a question of whatever you can maximize, wherever you can take that skill set, but be realistic about it. And I think also, if I may, there's another example of another individual I spoke to just doing a bit of extra research around this. They came out of the military. They had applied to join a program which put them into police, FAR, prison service. And this individual actually ended up going into the prison service, and they were there for 6 years. And at the end of that time, they said, you know what, this is just not me. I mean, it aligned to the skills they had, but they wanted to do something very, very specific. So they looked at it and they said, well, I'm going to have to retrain. They actually ended up doing a land management course while they were doing that retraining. But that's something very specific. How many people would know they want to come out of the military and do that land management course? They actually applied to, and I can say the name of the company, they applied to UK Power, who are also a very good pro vet organisation. And while they were there, they were supported during their studies. They've transitioned through various roles in the organisation. And actually, someone with that kind of background has now actually ended up working in a high cable voltage work. But again, it's stepping stones to get from the military, utilising their initial skills, give them time to adjust to civilian world, be it location, be it family, be it all those moving factors. They had a great successful role in that, and then took another step into something which they realised really was their passion. So I think my messaging is don't be too hard on yourself. Many people don't know what they want to do when they come out, but look for something which plays towards your skills.
Yeah. Great advice. I just think when you're getting out of the forces, it's similar to school. When you're leaving school, it was a while ago now for me, but you don't know what you don't know. So you got to get yourself out there into the big wide world and just learn and understand and kind of see what's going on to see where you fit into it. And it was exactly the same for me. It takes iterations over time to try and find your place in the world, So I think that's great advice. So people, they do some networking, they get that referral into the business. The CV's on point. You've seen the information that you want to see on the CV. How do they best articulate their skills with hiring managers then as well? Because obviously a conversation with talent acquisition and a conversation with a hiring manager is completely different. How would you advise the approach that?
Again, I would think it comes down to networking. The thing that's possibly slightly missing at the moment is when you have the resettlement groups, but they don't always have visibility of where people have gone in the past. So use that network. And if you get an interview for an organisation, which may be through a referral, it may not, go back to that original referral, that person you network with, and say, talk to me about the business, talk to me about the language. And if they haven't, are there other people they know? Again, do use the Armed Forces Covenant, because you will be able to reach out to people who are ex-military in those organisations who will help you to better understand and speak the language of the business. In terms of interviews themselves, quite often there is a process called STAR. I think people might have heard of it, situation, task, action, result. So that's a way of being interviewed. Someone might say, so Ben, tell me about a time you've had to deal with a difficult manager. Now, in your world, you might think, right, well, the lieutenant colonel was blah, blah, blah. But actually what someone wants to hear is, bring it down to civilian language. I had to deal with a manager who I had to deliver a bad message to. I was involved in a project that was under a massive deadline at the time. From that, so that's obviously what actually happened from the situation, the action. I had to deliver that message. The result was it was not well received. However, I was given resource to deliver on that, and the actual result at the end of the day was it was delivered. It was delivered in the right time frame, and while it cost us here, it actually meant we could redeploy something here. So that's sort of like a military answer to it, but it's how you then flip that to be a bit more civilian, and that I think just make sure you've got your outcomes, your results, what you achieved, and try and put that in that context. Also, in terms of, I would say before someone goes to an interview, you've got two pieces of information to prepare for, and that is you've got the job description, so you know what you're being interviewed against, and you've got your CV. When you go for that interview, nobody knows anything outside of those two. Those are the two factors you have. However, as a ex-military coming out into a civilian role, I think it's really important to have some of those case studies really in your mind, so you have those situations you can talk through and you can put them in the context of a civilian language. So the next point is you've got those two parts. When you're being interviewed, really focus on how you can bring out those examples in the context, and you're speaking the language of the hiring manager. So think about the role, where it goes, what you can bring, and just try and ensure that it stays in that civilian context. And the reality is, I know that the experience people have, it's very easy to talk about your experience when you've had active service or that. I'm not taking away from any of that at all, but it's how you bring those examples into a context that's going to be meaningful to a hiring manager who is looking at you sitting on a desk doing a specific role, and where you can bring all of yourself in to deliver well against that.
Yeah. I mean, all of this is preparation, isn't it? Just taking the time. And I think that's where you say, make sure that you've tailored your CV for a specific role, right? It's actually taking the time to think about where your skills translate, think about the type of role you want to move into, take the time to evolve your CV to that specific application, and then come well prepared to an interview is fundamentally what you're saying.
Yeah, and prior preparation, you may even want to ask your friends, go in, people you've networked with the organisation, and say, look, I'm thinking of using this example. If you were sitting in the shoes of a hiring manager, I'm trying to talk about something very specific from the military, how would that land in your organisation? Is that something that's relevant? Do I need to make it more specific? Is it even the wrong example to be using? So do play with that. Think of several examples that you can really bring out so you can show yourself in the best possible light. And ultimately, it is your job to try and speak the language of the hiring manager. They've come to the table, they've brought it to you, but the onus is, this is your moment to shine. You've done all the preparation. The military training you've had is incredible. You've got this, but you've got to be prepared to go in and work that a little bit harder. Unfortunately, I'm just going to say it, work that a little bit harder to help them to understand the true value you can bring.
Yeah, and it's a competitive process.
Yeah, it's competitive.
It's highly competitive. So it's about fundamentally winning it.
Yeah, totally. And we're the military, we're really good at that kind of stuff. We're excellent at delivery. We're given a task against all the odds, we will deliver and deliver against it. And that's why people, particularly in civilian contexts, survive so well. But I do think the context is, don't be too hard on yourself. Many roles are stepping stones. Hopefully you'll stay in the same organisation and grow and develop in that organisation. You may think, I need to go to a different organisation and do a similar role, something different. It's such a hard thing. But if you ask most people in their civilian roles, let's say, did you know what you're going to do 20 years ago? No one can answer you that. So when you come out of the military and you're looking for that next role, and someone says, oh, right, so you've signed up for a role with Marex, we'd love to have you for 20 years. But you know what? If it's not for you after 3 or 4 years, or any organisation that you join, that's also okay. Look at that next step, and in the same way you would with the posting. We're always sort of moving people around. Think about it that it's a stepping stone to you getting the best from your career and an employer getting the best from you.
And you also change, and I'm definitely conscious of time, and we'll move into maybe getting some questions from the floor. But you also change as an individual as you progress through your career. So the things you want, your drivers when you first get out. I was massively financially focused when I left. That's what I was interested in. I was interested in earning more money. But as you progress and develop, I've started to have other things that I wanted to do, more purpose, for my growing family. So, as your personal life develops and your professional life develops, what you want in a role or a company, it'll change anyway. So you're unlikely to be in that, you might have done 22 years and you're unlikely to be in an organisation for 22 years. That's just the reality of civilian life, isn't it?
And that's the excitement as well. But in the same way that if you were put in one role in the military for 20 years, we'd be bored. You can't do that. You have to keep on. We're ever good at evolution. We're always about evolving into the next role, the next challenge, taking on. That's what keeps it fresh and ensures we are absolutely delivering the best every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to bring up Slido on the screen, which is a QR code. So you'll be able to just register some of your questions there for the floor, and then I'll just pick some out and ask Nick. Any questions that we can't answer, we will follow up with a response, so then you've got the answer you're looking for. Cool. So let's start at the top. Is it true a lot of companies screen using automation software? Some companies specialize in this. Would you recommend getting help optimizing for that process?
I would say more and more are doing that. I would hope there is a human aspect in everything that's happening. The challenge is the number of applicants coming through. The biggest way, to be honest, to get through that and various other systems would actually be to ensure that you really have got the right words on there. So if you're applying for a compliance role, you do need, it sounds a bit cliche, you have got to have the word compliance on there. It's got to, that's why that summary, it's got to be really key. So there are ways, it's not gaming the system, because you hopefully would have worked in that case roles that would have had that. But the AI is only as good as it is picking out select words from CVs. I would ultimately just ensure it's the CV, because that's going to get you through.
This is an interesting one to me, because I know a lot of people who've kind of either stagnated in roles or want to make that pivot. So left a long time ago, but not very interested in, now very interested in getting to financial services. What's the advice when I'm not a service leaver to be able to pivot?
Yeah, come and talk to us. Come and talk to me. There's other people in the organisation. There's people I know across the city. There is a really good city network. An individual joined recently, Marex, about 6 weeks ago. Before we even joined, someone WhatsApped me, so-and-so's joining, excellent bloke, blah, 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 go meet him. And that is the network that you won't necessarily see. It's there, it's present with great skills. If I can't help you, there are other people I know who are part of informal or formal networks. And also have a look at the Armed Forces Covenant. There are organisations, for example, take on very, very specific military programs each year. You can always apply for that, which will give you work experience, which will then put you in a better position if you apply for roles directly.
And I know a lot of organisations now, financial services, fintech. We've just, I mean, Redeployable as an organisation just started working with an amazing fintech organisation in London who are actively looking for a military mindset in their org, which is fast moving, at high pace. They're looking for resilient people. So they're at, the Covenant, but there are also organisations that are specifically focused on that. Cool. Next one. If you do have to send in a cover letter, do you have any tips for an opening line? Or for the first line of your bio? I think that's an interesting one for the next one as well. Is what is the first thing you look at when reviewing a CV? Right? Is what's going to pique somebody's a talent acquisition person's interest from a CV and also from a cover letter if it's necessary.
You know what? It's summary and it's not being generalist. We're all amazing people, we're all wonderful. We've all achieved the following. Yeah, it's being very, very key in that. A seasoned, experienced individual who has had X time, or not even write the name, who has had experience across the following 5 sectors, working teams, highly driven, high performing. So it can have a little bit of, I guess, a sales part of it, but try and make it as specific as possible, and do consider reviewing that and changing it for the roles you're applying for. That is the first bit. So I'm going to look at name, I'm going to look at summary. Oh, great, okay, right, they're in the ballpark, they've done that. Qualifications, depending what level we're at, and obviously we go from junior brokers who are GCSE leavers through to people with, we didn't generally look for some of the masters, but we're looking for, say, a degree. But for example, we know where we are, and the next thing is the first or the last job you are doing, the first job on your CV, making sure that from that I can see very quickly what you've got from there. I may have a cursory view through the rest of the CV, and then obviously interests and activities. That's also, you don't need to be high powering doing whatever in those interests, but it is good to know, and it's good to know a bit more about the person. At that point, for me, it's a very quick review. As Ben said earlier, it is a matter of seconds that I can do that in, but I'm looking for something which says, is this the person who is capable of doing the job, has the motivation to do it, and brings something special to the organisation?
Amazing. So two more, and then what we'll do is we'll move on to maybe there's been a lot of information flying around in a really short space of time. So we'll do a bit of a kind of key takeaways from you, Nick, as a way to finish off. Do you think some employers have misconceptions around veterans? If so, how should I tackle them in an interview or application?
Yeah, misconception is quite a hard word. I think it is generally a lack of understanding. We all know people in military, in workplaces who've done amazing, amazing things. I think the challenge is Quite often people are viewed as going to operational roles or chief of staff roles rather than actually working the business itself. There is nothing to stop you from working the business. And if you are looking, for example, you have some funding or some time, you may consider doing for example, junior finance role or some kind of qualification or something, a comment or a day release to shadow, get in those organisations just so you've got a little bit of extra knowledge or something. In terms of misconceptions, I don't think it's you as an individual to deal with that. It's about looking at your CV, how you present yourself and bringing the value, and don't ever undermine yourself. The experience you have in the military is incredible. It may not directly relate to that role, but there's probably 90% of it that will, providing you're speaking the same language. But I genuinely think people want to help people come out of the military. And everyone I've ever worked with, I mean, obviously for military and civilian, they're incredible people. In fact, most people are incredible, but military offer this incredible something to it, which is just brilliant. In the same way, someone's ex-military, you just get on with them. This is a high-achieving, high-performing, delivery-focused person who relates well to people, can bloody get on with the job and do something well. You know that before they even open their mouth, because they already have that. That's what it says about being a vet. So I think it's more of a misunderstanding, but wanting to understand rather than a misconception.
One of the most satisfying things in our business and in our role is when you meet an organisation who have had very little experience with the military community, then you connect them with people in the military community, become employees, and you get the feedback in terms of the mindset and the way they work and how refreshing it is for those employers, and they want to hire more people from the military community. So, that was a great answer, but for me, some organisations just don't know until they know, and that's always a great thing as well. So,
Yeah.
and finally,
you can do that. You can help them understand and translate those skills into what that means to their organisation and what someone brings.
yeah, absolutely. Finally,
do you know what?
How do you?
Yeah. Sorry.
Go on. Sorry, Nick. No, go on, Nick. Go on.
This is my least favourite part of the job, telling someone they haven't got the job. It's really hard. And sometimes, do you know what? It's just not the right role for them. I'm never going to go in too hard. I'm going to try and say, look, this role is not the right role. However, here's some points, some feeders. I'm trying to give someone something positive. Depending on someone's level of experience, I'm 20 years into it, and I still find it difficult telling people, I'm really sorry you haven't got the role. You may be dealing with a very junior recruiter. They may be in the role for a few months, and they're going to have said to you. So sometimes what you get is not actually what the actual answer is. It's that they just don't want to tell you haven't got the role. I would always say, is there anything I can take away from this? Are there any learning points? Try and keep it as positive. Make it easy for the person, because it's honestly, it's the bit that I hate most about my role. It's so tough when you say it to people. So don't always take what's said as actually verbatim. That's what they're actually saying. The reality is, as Ben said, it's a competitive market. What they're saying really is, do you know what? There was someone who was more aligned to the role than you in this circumstance. But no one really wants to hear that. So that's why we end up with this weird and wonderful kind of letdown questions.
Yeah, which is sometimes really frustrating for candidates who are getting, if they're not given clear instruction as to why, or no response at all, then they're unable to learn from that experience, right? So it's I can definitely sense like the frustration, but then I also, from a talent acquisition lens, can understand it from especially a junior talent acquisition person who's maybe not been in the industry for a long time. It must be a difficult conversation.
Our message to say to someone at the end of the day, we don't want you, but the reality, it just means someone was more aligned in this particular time on that particular day for the role we were looking for.
Amazing. Okay, so let's finish up with loads of information, loads of amazing information, Nick, and I'm sure everyone's got a ton of value from the conversation. Can you give us your 3 key takeaways, just so people can just summarise what you've covered?
Absolutely. The biggest thing is believe in your own worth. Moving from the military into a civilian role is really hard. I think it's just be kind to yourself during that time. It's okay. Not everyone's going to get it perfect, and just work through that transition, but never undervalue your worth, because you have some incredible skills and they will translate into your next role. It may not be immediate, but you will find that, and use those stepping stones where appropriate. I think the big one, network. I can't say that enough. Go out in whatever context you have, whatever capacity. If someone says, oh, come meet yes, the answer is yes. Go and meet as many people as you can, or say, focus on a particular area. Use your military network, go and see someone and say, is there anyone you know in my compliance, finance, risk, whatever area? Could you set up a coffee for me? Could I have a conversation with them? Could I take 10 minutes of their time? Don't be pushy or brash with it, but just ask for that buy-in. And people genuinely, they like to be asked. We're all against time pressures, but be gracious with the information and feedback they can have. And the last thing I was going to say, ultimately, life is ultimately about constant readjustment. The very essence of what humans are is we have the ability to adapt to our surroundings. You have done that multiple times within the military, in multiple postings, in multiple scenarios, in multiple locations. You can do that, and you will do that in the civilian world. It's a big step, but ultimately the ability to adapt and overcome is the very essence of what we are. So just be prepared for that journey. There's no end to it. It will continue to go, but you have the ability, and probably a better ability than many people in civilian street, to be able to do that more effectively. And I wish you luck from that perspective, because it's a nerve-wracking time, but hold your faith and it will happen, and something incredible will be there. And if you look forward in 5 years' time, you may want to visualize it, you may want to see where you are, but actually that place will be a very different place to where you are now. And the journey you go on, you'll be able to look back and go, wow. And that's the bit that I'm sure like Ben would like to hear more about.
Yeah. Wise words. Thanks so much, Nick. Thanks for taking the time to speak to everyone. We've had a really good attendance today. Some really good questions. As a side note, for the people listening, we're Redeployable launching a skills first community of career driven veterans in the very near future. So tune in. What we hope to do in the next weeks coming is bring people of your experience with amazing advice to these lives and to the community, to start giving out this sort of amazing advice. It's invaluable for people who aren't going to be able to meet somebody like you in their career when they're trying to find a new role. So thank you so much, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you. And good luck,
Cheers.
everybody. Thank you for joining.
Bye.